Thank you so much for the invitation. I have to start with a disappointing remark, namely, I'm not going to provide you with any kind of best practice for the sole reason that we are not yet there. And the second remark I want to make right at the outset is I always have in these sorts of, let's say, conferences or symposia, the problem with introducing myself. Because I have here, I'm speaking with three hats, I would say. The one hat is somebody who was born and raised in Senegal, a Senegalese. So I have been with this hat, I'm actually in the other end. I'm speaking also as CEO of the Medicor Foundation. The Medicor Foundation is a foundation which is based in the Principality of Liechtenstein. And I will come to the foundation shortly. And the third hat, which is the most difficult one, is that I'm a philosopher by training. And all those questions that we have been speaking about today, they are very complex issues, very complex questions. And my philosopher hat does not help me much to actually arrive at a conclusion in a way, because these are extremely complex. And as for those of you who are familiar with philosophy, there is a saying that goes as follows: in philosophy, questions are more important than answers, and every answer leads to another question. So that is kind of a permanent struggle in a way, a permanent putting into question, which, by the way, is some of the things that I very much like. Not just in a normal life, but also in the life that we are actually having in this sector. I think we don't put into question enough what we are doing. I think we don't ask ourselves often the question about the justification, about the raison d'être of what we are doing, about whether we are doing the right thing or not, right? I'm speaking here with these three hats, and I'm not going to provide any kind of, I would say, best practices. I'm just coming here to exchange with you and to learn a lot. I have been able to learn really a lot already in the morning session, and now I would just be very much engaged with actually providing some pathways that I think from a donor perspective, and I will be speaking just from a donor perspective. What kinds of roles should we have as donors, should we play at all in this whole issue about decolonization and localization, localization of aid and localization? As I said, my three hats don't help me with that. However, I think as donors, we need to act on at least four things. And these are the four things I call the four pathways. The first pathway would be, I think we need to reflect and engage much deeper with our partners. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we need to go beyond the exchanges that we have with our partners on what is it that the project is doing, what is the logic of the intervention, what is the log frame, why isn't the log frame so well constructed, structured? We need to go beyond the whole issue of KPIs, right? Whether 200 children are attending school or 302 are attending school. I'm not saying that these are not important things. They are very important things. But I think we need to engage with our partners on, I call them strategically fundamental issues. What are those? First, we need to think about challenging our partners about exit strategies. Medicor Foundation works mostly with those big INGOs from Switzerland, from Germany, and from Austria. And the question that I often ask is, what is the strategic orientation you have about your local partner organization? Do you have a strategic plan that actually foresees an exit? And if yes, when and how, right? Do you have a strategic plan that actually elaborates on issues like ownership, issues like participation, right? And by the way, participation, we hear it, we read it in our proposals. I think I haven't read in the last, I would say 7 years, I haven't read any proposal which didn't actually mention participation, right? But what is participation, right? Participation for me is not about, having everybody on board. It's about having everybody on board, but right at the beginning, right, on board. It is about empowering people. It is about giving actually a voice to those who don't have a voice. For me, participation is not about, because often the contexts in which we are working, they have structures. And often those people who speak are those people who have the power. And it will be an illusion to think that we will be actually having, or will fulfill the demands of participation if and only if we would have actually everybody around. To be around is not enough. We need to go a bit further, namely to have those people who otherwise would not have a voice, to give them a voice. That's for me what is participation. And we need to engage with our partners on those issues, as I said. And mostly and foremost, we need really to speak with our partners about, I know there are some partners who are really doing a very good job when it comes to those issues that I will be speaking. But there are just, I would say, a few of them, for my experience. That's why we need really to engage with those, let's say, partners on those topics, which are, for me, very, very important and which are crucial for the topic that we are actually talking about today, namely the decolonization of aid. What do we need as funders? We need a second pathway. What is the second pathway about? We need, where possible, to move away from, I would say, funding just projects. We need to fund institutions. We need to fund CSOs. We need to fund local communities. Of course, there are some legal constraints. As a foundation, you need to do anything in line, aligned with the deed of your foundation. But there are some foundations which have actually quite a broad, I would say, formulation of their deed, which could allow them to work actually not to support not projects, but to support really institutions, right? Why aren't we not doing that? I know, again, what I'm saying is a bit of an exaggeration. I know that there are some, let's say, foundations, there are some organizations that do that, right? And that's just very encouraging to have those foundations do that. Third pathway, I think we need to fund directly. Where possible and where it makes sense, we need to fund local organizations directly. We don't need necessarily always to go through intermediaries, right? And I will even push the button a bit further. If a foundation can do it, I would really like to see foundations fund those organizations that otherwise nobody funds. When I say we need to work with local organizations, often I hear, but they are not well prepared. But they are not good. They are having lack, they have lack in financial management, they have lack in leadership, they have lack in, you name it, right? But if we work with only those foundations or those organizations, those local organizations that are just fulfilling, let's say, the Western and European standards, what about the others, right? My dream is to have a foundation, to have a lot of money, to have a foundation where actually those will be my target. Those foundations or those organizations that otherwise nobody funds, right? And to work with them and to be able to take the risk. Of course, there is a risk issue there, right? But what is actually greater? What is a greater of a risk? I think to leave them behind is greater of a risk than just to work with them, right? I have heard today many times already in the morning, people asking for, let's do our homework. Yes, we need to do our homework, but how do we do that? I think there are two, I would say, things we need to take into account. The first one is the person who do the work, the staff. What types of profiles do we need for those people who do the work? Okay? When I recruit somebody, I'm not just going to recruit somebody who is very good in project management. Even if I need a project manager. Why? Because for me, there are greater stakes. There are greater issues at stakes. There are issues which are very much more important or equally important than just being good at project management. What are those things? I think critical thinking is one of them. I was very pleased and honored to have participated in one of the survey or study that has been conducted by Sainfo and Nadel here, and which actually asked the question, that was last year, which asked the question, what kinds of skills, what kind of competencies do people who work in international development cooperation, what do they need? And when I was asked, I had my two top priorities. There were just three. We need to be self-critical. We need to be able to ask the question whether what we are doing is really the right thing. We need to have in our organizations people who really disturb and disrupt, ask those questions that otherwise nobody asks. Okay? We need to have people who are able to think in network. We need to have people who have this systems thinking. Because whatever we do here will have anyway an influence somewhere else. And we need people who should be able actually to grab that complexity and to be able also to understand the relations that there are between what we do here and what happens somewhere else. Third, we need cultural sensitivity. We need people who are culturally competent. I always say international development cooperation, it is nothing else but just intercultural dialogue. We need translators, we need interpreters, right? We need people who can move back and forth in those two or more than two worlds. We need people who have the codes to decipher the messages. We need people who show some sort of openness, some sort of comprehension of what is it that we are tackling with here. And we need, last but not least, people who are not falling prey of generalization. And one of the most fatal generalization is to speak about Africa or to speak about Africans, because there is no such thing. There is no Africa, there is no Africans in singular. There are Africans and there are Africas. We should be starting with that already. As I said, I was born in Senegal, raised in Senegal. I'm a Senegalese, and our neighbors are Mali, Mauritania, and the two Guinea. But we are so different, right? And I would actually never accept us putting us all in actually the same basket, because it's just different. And even within the same country. Even within the same country. So it is an illusion to actually think about Africa as just one complex unit, because there is no such thing. Right? It's just in our minds, I would put it this way. Last but not least, we need to have in our organizations a culture of openness. And what I mean by culture of openness is a culture in which we are not afraid of making mistakes. Right? In German, it's called Fehlerkultur. And that is something that really lacks in our sector. We are not open to accepting, to listening to people telling us, hey, I have made a mistake here. So what? We make mistakes, and together we work on actually correcting that mistake. And that has to start from us. That means from us donors, right? And I participated in the symposium 3 weeks ago, and they asked me, what is it that you want to see in a report? And I say, in a report, I want actually to see what hasn't worked. And I want our partners to actually report on what went wrong. And then the question was, but if they report on what went wrong, they are not going to get the money. I said, exactly, that's the problem. The problem is not at their end. The problem is with us. We need to be able to accept mistakes, and we need to be able to make our partners comfortable that if they report on mistakes, there is not going to be any kind of negative consequences. Quite the contrary. I'm not going to be long. I am looking forward to the exchanges and the questions that you might have. As I said, I'm not offering any kind of best practice. I'm just offering some of the thoughts that came to my mind, actually, with those 3 heads that I do have. Thank you very much.